Yes, at the surprising time of 17 minutes after the hour, it is indeed Biden time. Welcome to our Thanksgiving special, mostly because it's the day before Thanksgiving. As always, am Christian Bladt. Over there, you see the one and only Mr. Scott Moore. Hello, Scott. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Hello, same to you and to everyone out there.
Yeah, and I was, reading a little earlier that sometimes we see a jury trial where we get a verdict that makes sense to people, and I think it helps to restore faith in a system that sometimes people wonder, like, oh, why is it always broken? But the Ahmaud Arbery verdict, I think, is one that I guess you can cast your own judgment, no pun intended, when you think one's right and one's wrong. But it's one where you feel like, okay, this one they got right, and obviously for his family, that's small comfort. But I think it's with so much attention last week on the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict that I think it's important to highlight when something happens and people seem to not be left shaking their head and wondering what happened. Did it feel that way to you, Scott?
It did. Excuse me. It certainly did, and the Rittenhouse one from last week. There are more complicating factors for that than just a cut and dry case.
Yeah.
And that's part of the challenges that you have, which each of these individual cases are going to have results that maybe on the surface people aren't happy with. However, it's based off of the law and everything going on with the law. And, and I've said this before, is we need to look at changing some of these laws so that things where we get verdicts that we don't agree with, like Rittenhouse last week, we can go to and say, okay, now we need to change these laws to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. But in the case with today, there is a sense of relief in the sense that, like, when it does work, justice does work. And to be able to have that today is a bit of a balancing act from what we dealt with on the previous verdict for most folks. So this, I feel, was a correct and right verdict that they came with today. And hopefully that will, I don't want to say ease tensions, because again, these are both very different situations and different cases, but hopefully this will at least ease for some folks to see that when it is in the correct way of how it should be, then justice would be served. And today did prove that point, though we're far, far away from that. And we do need to look overall in the near future of what we can do to strengthen or to change our laws that we have on the books now, to make sure that we do continue to not have two different justice systems and other issues going on. But this is definitely a good step in the right direction, and justice was definitely served with this hearing, with this verdict today.
Yeah, no, I agree, and as someone who typically likes to hold the belief that the system does work, it's nice that sometimes it reminds you that it does, because there are definitely times where you're just like, wait, does it? Does the system actually work?
Right.
So yeah, and I think that it's I don't even know that it's not necessarily comforting, but it's good to know that it can happen. So
Exactly.
as we look to the Thanksgiving of it all, hopefully everyone in the audience is wherever they need to be for Thanksgiving, or just staying home. I believe I have a brief drive down to Orange County tomorrow for my wife's family. Scott, if you're in the LA area at this point on Wednesday afternoon, I assume you are not traveling anywhere for Thanksgiving.
I am not. I just traveled last week for work, so
Right.
I am definitely traveled out for the moment. But I have family coming here, so they are making
Excellent.
their drive as we do this show. They're making their way here, so yeah.
Well, that's good. And if maybe we'll hear a honk during the show, which means Scott has to go. He's like,
Right.
he's like, I got to start cooking. What was I thinking? But obviously, this, yes, people traveled, people saw family last year. But I mean, this is for many people, this is the first really like normal Thanksgiving in 2 years. So I think a lot more people are traveling, and it's going to be a lot of
Mhm.
people who aren't used to the way traveling is. I mean, you travel a lot. It's mostly the same in terms of the crowds, but there's like less planes now and more cancellations and stuff, right? I mean, that's the big
Mhm.
change, is more like shortages, right?
Well, that and obviously having to wear masks
Sure.
the minute you walk into an airport until you leave. So that's obviously a change from the past, and they don't mess around with that. So if you don't have your mask on, you don't get to fly. So there's definitely those changes, but yeah, this is really the first Thanksgiving, and I think there's a lot of like pent up demand to get back out there and see family and friends and loved ones. And so it's crazy out there, which is another reason why I tend to avoid traveling um, long distances over by plane for Thanksgiving in general. I always
Yeah.
have. I did it in the early 2000s, and it was just a pain for such a short trip. So I tend to now do it at the end of the year holidays when you have a few more days to work with. So I've never been a big fan of the crunch for travel over Thanksgiving, but this year I feel is going to be even worse because you're going to have a lot of people that have not traveled in a long period of time that are going back out again. So I think it's just going to be challenging for everybody with increased busyness and crowdedness, and then with folks that this might be their first outing out traveling in 2 years. So you mix all that together, and it's not necessarily going to be fun. So I just hope everyone has some patience and um, just just take it easy, and hopefully can everyone can get where they need to go safely and as quickly as possible. Yeah, it's going to be crazy out there. That is for sure.
Yeah, I moved to Los Angeles 18 years ago, 2003, and in that time I have traveled once for Thanksgiving, and it's because my cousin was getting married that weekend. So it's the only time I ever did it. I've never thought like it's worth it for yes, it's a long weekend, but it's just that. And especially when you work in entertainment, a lot of times you get
Hmm.
a week or two off at Christmas time. So it's like, yeah, just go for a long time later.
Right.
But not everybody has that luxury. And look, a lot
No.
of people, it's a simple fact of if they stay where they are, they're maybe they have friends they can spend it with. But some
Hmm.
people just want to see family, and I get it. So yeah, hopefully people are going to be patient, because they're dealing with sort of new regulations in terms of you mentioned mask mandates and for airports and for flights, but obviously long lines, and I don't think we're not mandating vaccines for air travel, so that would be another delay. But
Hmm.
rental cars are scarce and therefore very expensive. Gas for the rental cars costs a little more, so there's sort of the domino effect of the weekend away for Thanksgiving is going to be a bit of a headache, and of course a little bit more expensive. And you have the supply chain issues. It just depends on who you listen to. If you listen to White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, turkey costs about $1 more than it did last year. I think it's the Department of Agriculture threw out a statistic that it will cost 14% more than last year, which is a number that is definitely being disputed. But we've talked about this on the show a couple times. I still haven't really run into it here, but I have now seen friends in other parts of the country who have posted pictures of empty supermarket shelves, and I don't think that the whole store is empty, but things that they're looking for are gone. And I have there have been a few items where I'm like, well, I guess I'm not getting that brand of soy sauce because that shelf is gone. That
Hmm.
sort of little minor inconveniences. So I hopefully everybody's able to have the dinner they want. And for people that aren't traveling and don't have family in town, Boston Market's open tomorrow. And I'm sure that similar places like that. But yeah, I think it'll be we'll talk in a moment about sort of an overall dissatisfaction here in the country. People having a miserable Thanksgiving weekend isn't really going to help that, is it, Scott?
No, exactly. I mean, we have an interesting dichotomy right now because, like you said, we have these supply chain issues, which in my travels, it's been a lot of domestic. Well, it's been all domestic this year, as opposed to the past where I normally had gone internationally. But I've definitely noticed when you get back to certain places, the Rockies down to Southeast, and everything, I've definitely noticed the empty shelves.
Yeah.
And it's not just the supply chain issues; it's also a hiring issue. I was just in North Carolina again last week, and I overheard a woman talking about how they had to close their restaurant early because they were short staffed. And I've noticed that when you go to certain restaurants and stuff, you see tons of empty tables, but you have a long wait because they just don't have enough staff. Um, and then, like you said, the inflation and the record high gas prices that are pinching people's pocketbooks right now. But then on the other hand, you see that the jobless claims are the lowest they've been since 1969, which that came out today. Stocks have been a bit bumpy lately, but they've been at record highs. And there are jobs out there for people that want them, and they have increased pay. Of course, some people argue that it hasn't still kept up with inflation, but you have a lot of really great things going on. Plus, the vaccines, the boosters have been put out for anyone that wants them that are 18 and older now. There are no restrictions anymore to that, which again allows people to gather if they want. So, it is an interesting dichotomy because a lot of people are not feeling optimistic with the economy and everything. But on most of the items to look at, things are really, really good, especially for this country, even compared to a lot of other countries right now around the world. And the hope is that some of these supply chain issues will ease out over the beginning of the new year. Oil prices, the price of oil has already started to dip a bit. We'll see what's going to happen. The president just released the reserve, but that could backfire if OPEC decides to withhold shipments as well. So there will be some things that we'll have to see over the coming months. But overall, entering this holiday season, America is definitely in a generally a good place, which is just not resonating with most people right now because they're sticker shock with seeing the higher prices, or like you said, the empty store shelves, or the long waits at restaurants, other places because there's not enough workers. But I feel like most of that stuff will ease out. People will have to go back to work at some point after some of this money subsides that they had gotten during the pandemic. And so it seems like things will hopefully settle out and the economy is growing and these boosters are out, and we'll see hopefully some progress over the coming months. But right now it's understandable that people are frustrated when it's difficult to get things. And when you do, you're paying so much more for them. So there's challenges out there for sure, but there's also a lot of really good bright spots right now that people aren't really thinking about, but are there. And so, like I said, it's an interesting dichotomy right now to see the differences right now of how people are feeling, but then the reality of like how good things really are on some of these areas.
Yeah, and I think that, you referenced sort of, compared to last year where, yes, some people saw family. I did see my wife's family last year, but people who were unable to or hesitant to last year, there is a little bit more of a comfort in the fact that, people who want to be are able to be vaccinated now, for the most part. Obviously, you have a simple fact that, there are definitely people who are like, yeah, I would love to get vaccinated, but I need time off from work. And then what happens if I get sick from a shot? So there's that level of hesitation that has nothing to do with the science. It's just a practical. And, I had to reschedule a shot for my son because the day he was supposed to get it, he had a high fever, had nothing to do. He didn't get the shot yet. So I was like, I can't get it.
Wow.
And then I was looking and I'm like, wow, there's one place in North Hollywood is giving them out on Thanksgiving Day. And then I thought about it for a second. I'm like, that's a day a lot of people can probably go. We're not going to go that day, but the idea that a lot of people could go, it's like, it just made me start thinking. I'm like, oh yeah, it's got to be really hard for people to like circle off, block off this amount of time on this day. And then 3-4 weeks later, another time. And, but I got my booster very easily, and it definitely made me tired on 2 different occasions. But, I've said this to Scott before. Does it make me tired because I got a shot, or am I tired because I have 2 kids? I can't tell the difference,
Right.
So I was just like, I'm really tired at 9 o'clock at night, but I'm kind of tired at 9 o'clock at night every night. So I don't know what the difference is. But I think that for the people that this is important to, there is that comfort level. And
Mhm.
then, but then you'll see there was a piece from CBS this morning that was circulating on Twitter this morning, which was this idea that, if you have a Thanksgiving gathering, you should start off in the garage where people have like appetizers, and you wait for everybody to get their test results. And then if it's positive, then you can go into the house. And I was just like, well, that's stupid. If I'm inviting people to my house, I'm going to trust
Mhm.
them that they went and got tested. If they tell me that they did, you know, and if they got it the day before, those rapid tests that you do in the house, there's some degree of error in there.
Mhm.
But it's when you hear things like that, that's when people start to throw up their arms about like, oh, come on, just let me have Thanksgiving. And I understand a lot of these things come from a good place of like, well, you want to make sure that you're being safe, especially if you have elderly relatives,
Mhm.
anybody who's at risk. But the idea that you're going to make people show up at your house, thanks, I'm going to go bring this in the kitchen. Can you stay out in the
Mhm.
driveway for 20 minutes while let me swab your nose? No, you
Yep.
can't use the restroom. You're going to have to wait, and I'll see if
Mhm.
you're allowed to come in the house. So things like that, which I don't believe is going to be a widespread practice. But then you start to hear recommendations like that, and it sort of eats away at the efficacy of saying like, you should get vaccinated so that you can see each other at the holidays. So again, Scott, I don't think it's something that a lot of people, I'll be shocked if somebody that I know goes to a Thanksgiving gathering where they had to hang out in the garage for 20 minutes. But the
Yeah.
suggestion that that's the way to handle it does sort of eat into the fact that a lot of people are just like, oh, come on already.
Right, and I think that does draw the frustration for folks. It's like, okay, because you're right. I mean, to ask people to do that is a bit extreme. Um, Obviously, I think it's a case by case situation. It's like if you're around someone who's unvaccinated, perhaps, or like you
Sure.
said, someone who's people that are over 70 or people that have severe health issues, then you obviously would probably want to take those extra precautions. But maybe we'd be like, hey, go get your test before you even come to the house, if that was the case. So we
Yeah.
all know, and then they're comfortable because, like I always say too, and this comes for work and other things. The last thing you want to do is get up, get ready, drive to wherever you're going, and then you find out, oh, someone tested positive, and now you've already in with the group or mixed in. So the smart thing would be, if you really are at a place where you're hosting somebody like that, is to have people do it ahead of time before they are coming to you, so that everybody knows before they're even
Yeah.
driving or going to where they're going, that they can prevent even showing up if for some reason, God forbid, they test positive or whatever. And then that way you're just protecting everybody. I could see some people that might be more cautious with that, but I agree with you. I think that would be a very small number of people, and like I mentioned, it would be for those certain situations. But I think,
Yeah.
again, now this year compared to last year, having the option to be vaccinated, and most people that have been vaccinated now that feel they want that extra comfort level are being boosted. And if you've been boosted and it's been a couple weeks since then, the likelihood of even having to be concerned about it and you're healthy otherwise is so minimal now that you should be able to go and enjoy and have a great time and not have to be concerned about it.
Yeah. And
And
then
not
it's
even be concerned
also,
about having it to give it to anybody too, because of course that's another issue, is that you are still able to get it as a breakthrough case, but you pass it to someone else. But if you have it and you're asymptomatic, then the likelihood of passing it to someone else is so minimal too.
yeah. And then this, of course, becomes, a question for mismanners for gatherings in the future. Is it rude to ask people to show proof of a negative test for a gathering? I think it is. Like you could try and be kind of, if you, and again, this isn't for if what you're talking about, my 78-year-old, the 78-year-old president is going to be there and we worry about him. I wasn't even going to say that, but I was just thinking 78 years old,
Well,
yeah.
he's
So
79 now, so
you're right. He is 79.
since last
Yeah.
week.
Yeah. My 79-year-old Uncle Joe's going to be there.
Yeah,
So we want to
yeah.
be extra cautious. But apart from that, just the idea of like, yeah, can you text me your screenshot of your negative test results? I feel like that is of course something that would be considered very rude. Back in September, my wife planned a bachelorette party for her sister, and she did ask everybody to get tested before they got together, but she did not say, "And can you email me those test results?" So I think for most situations, I think that might be the line that we need not cross. Is like I'm saying, if I'm inviting you to my house, you're someone that I trust in my life.
No, I agree with you. I think again, if it's family or loved ones or close friends, and you're inviting them to your house, then you would know that would be the kind of person you trust. And again, you're opening up your house, which means you're opening it up to a bit of risk, right? So
Sure.
either you have to be comfortable, either because you've been vaccinated or boosted, or you are unvaccinated but you feel comfortable with having people in. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think if they were close family or friends that you've known forever, that they might feel comfortable enough to at least show you or text you if they felt, because you're of a closeness. But I don't think you should be going out of your way to ask people or demand it before they come in, because like you said, if you're hosting, then you're opening it up to a bit of that risk, and you have to be prepared for that and do what you need to do to protect yourself. Because again, the other issue that I always have had with this is that, especially a rapid test, it's just an immediate snapshot in time. So it really means nothing in the big scheme of things. Like, yes, it can let down your comfort level, but somebody could still be positive and it hasn't shown up yet. It's showing you a very specific snapshot in time. So there's always that inherent risk. And if you are that concerned, then one, you should not be hosting a gathering at your house, or two,
Fair.
you have to treat everybody then as if they're positive, and you keep, you do what you need to do to make yourself feel safe. But there is no way of preventing that unless you're going to all come over and they're going to quarantine at your house for 10 days and and then test
Yeah.
negative, and you're going to be there. I mean, there's just no way of being able to minimize your risk. And I think that's part of the problem that has upset a lot of people in general, that it's become such an extreme thing where, as you know, the minute you leave your house, you're taking on a bit of risk in every day-to-day life, whether it's crossing the street and being moved down by a bus, whatever it is, you take a risk the minute you walk outside your door. I mean, obviously there's risk even at home, but
Yeah, of
the
course.
general is that when you go out in public or you're interacting with people outside of your household, the minute you do that, you're introducing risk, and there's always going to be that risk. And if that's not something you're comfortable with, then either you need to stay back or you need not to have a host for a gathering. So there's always going to be that there. So yeah, I don't think asking people is necessary. I think if they're loved ones, they'll share with you if they need to, because they'll have nothing. They'll be, it goes back to they'll have nothing to hide. Like we was talking about with Trump, it's like when you go so much not wanting to prevent people from hearing something, then you're trying to hide something. It's that same thing. So if it became a thing where someone didn't want to show their results, then clearly they would have something to hide. And also that would be the height of irresponsibility for someone to show up at a gathering who tested positive.
Yeah.
Besides your, I mean, so imagining someone showing up at your house that had tested positive, knowingly knowing that and going to your place too, would just be really an awful person to do that. So I don't know if you'd want to be friends or around that person if they were going to purposely show up after they knew they were positive. So I think the likelihood of that happening would just be so slim anyways.
Yeah, and of course, we live somewhere where an option is also you could have Thanksgiving in the afternoon and have it outside. Which
Absolutely.
the first Thanksgiving that I spent with my now wife's family, down in Orange County, it was like the high 70s, and I kept looking. I'm like, why are we not out there right by the pool? So like the idea of an outside Thanksgiving has actually always appealed to me, but I know that most of the country that is not an option. So
right.
Well, 77% of Americans are saying that inflation is affecting their lives right now, this holiday season. 57% blame President Biden for soaring prices. According to, the article I read was from the Daily Mail, but I don't have the source right here. But it says prices have surged 6.2% since October 2020. And at the pump, prices of a gallon of gas have reached upwards of $4 and $5 in some areas of the country. Still not at the all-time high that I think I paid in 2012. I think I spent like $4.69 a gallon. So it's getting closer, but personal anecdotal experience doesn't take away the fact that a lot of people are feeling this. And President Biden's approval rating is 42%. So I think it shows that people are not happy. So, if you are the White House, what can you possibly do of substance over the next month? I mean, a month from today is Christmas Eve. So, you can try and send people into the new year with, not like, oh, everything's all right, but maybe, something that an optimistic indication. Do you feel that that a month is enough time for the White House to do really anything?
Well, I mean, look, again, we've talked about this ad nauseum in previous times. There's only so much. Again, a president gets the proportional blame for things that go wrong, and
Yeah.
proportional credit when things go right that really exceed what they really are involved in or capable of doing on a day-to-day basis. But we've talked about this a bit, and there is some blame to say for Biden and the fact that we've seen some inflationary issues, and that was when we continued to do the huge government stimulus money, because what happened is we gave people all this extra money, and one has prevented people from, not prevented, but has been able to give people more of a chance to not go back to work right away, and to be a little bit more particular on what they want to do. So now you have shortages in staff, and obviously some of those other issues have caused supply chain issues as well, not just from the logistics of shutting down an entire economy over the past year and then trying to restart it back up again. And we talked about this last year. You can't just flip a switch and then flip it back on again and everything goes back to normal right away. It's a very slow process. So some of it you could say is directly, and I would say attributed, is the stimulus payments. And maybe we didn't need that last round of stimulus payments earlier this year, because now you're having too much money chased around too few products. Hence why we're seeing inflation, because we're doubling with that issue of people having their money and their savings in their pocket. But now you have people now wanting to spend money for products that aren't there on the shelves and everything. So now when you have too much money chasing less product, you tend to get inflationary issues. And then on top of it all, you have the other issues with gas and oil. Same thing. Oil went back up again when the demand rose, but it went up so fast, and OPEC has been kind of stingy on releasing more, that again, when there's less oil around, you're going to have higher prices. So there are some things they can do, and we've said this before too. They need to be better at messaging. The Democrats have always been really bad about messaging. Again, with the first infrastructure bill here, it's all been focused, including with the media, on the price tag, the price tag, the price tag. But what Democrats need to do is go out and really say, this is how this is going to affect you for the better in your daily lives, this, and this. And then the next part of the bill that they're hoping to sign before Christmas, which would be in a month from now, ostensibly, and it looks pretty positive they will get there. That's when they need to go out again too and say, now we have done this other big ginormous bill and this is how it's going to help everyday Americans, this, and this, and going on that instead of focusing on the price tag. And then Biden will have a really good accomplishment over this past year on some huge bills that have passed that are going to make a difference, which again, Donald Trump talked about for 4 years and was not able to do. Then they can go to the jobless rate going down, the unemployment numbers going out for unemployment is the lowest again in 52 years. And being able to start talking about some of the positive things that really are going on in the economy. He released fuel out of the national reserves this past week. Again, we'll have to see if it's really going to affect anything, or if OPEC's going to double down and restrict more oil from flowing, which would really not do much to ease prices. He went out last month and opened the ports to 24-hour access to make sure we could start working through the logjam of some of these supply chain issues coming from other parts of the world, which was something that he directly involved himself with. So those are some of the things that, as president, he can do. And we'll see how it's going to work out with the inflationary issues. He renominated Powell against the chagrin of a lot of the progressive wing of the Democrats. That now he had told him the focus is to keep working on tamping down the inflationary concerns, because it's going to be very difficult for the Fed to be able to find that balancing act of being able to increase interest rates, but not enough that it cools the economy too much that we have issues too. So it's going to be a balancing act for the Fed. But he made that decision as well this week. And if that proves to be positive by keeping Jerome Powell in as Fed chair, might be able to help some of these inflationary concerns over the coming months as well. So they just need to go out and message that, and hope that some of these other issues that are outside of their control do tamp down in the coming months. And again, a year is a long time, a little less than a year is a long time away for the midterms. Who knows what's going to happen between now and then that will either shock the economy one way or the other, or making people feel good one way or the other. But those are at least the things that they can start with. And again, really getting their messaging on point, because Republicans are very good at messaging, and Republicans are very good about filing behind in the ranks and being able to all have one coherent message, whatever that is. And Democrats tend to be a little bit more all over the place. And if they can get everybody together and have some clear messaging and really focus on the good things they've done over the past year, it will potentially help his approval ratings as we head to the midterms.
Yeah, no, I think that that is important. And, in terms of messaging and popularity, there is depending on where you get your information from, there is a narrative that Vice President Harris is being somewhat sidelined and marginalized. I mean, specifically, I mentioned the Daily Mail a moment ago. They had these photos of but both the president and vice president went to a soup kitchen, and they're not standing near each other. But I was like, all right, I think that you're trying a little too hard to tell that story, because even within this specific piece, they mentioned that he did gesture that she should stand by her husband, Doug. So, but this anecdotal evidence aside, we're maybe not seeing as much of Harris. And do you feel like that she's not fitting into the messaging they're going for? Is she just too busy? What do you think? Where do you think things are now? Now that they've been in office together for really for 11 full months.
Well, I think you have you have the drama that's trying to be created, that there's all this drama and intrigue, and that Kamala Harris is not getting along with the messaging of the administration. And then you also have them saying, okay, Biden's not going to run for re-election. So, if he's not running for re-election, who's going to be the standard bearer? Is it really going to be her? Because she's not very good at messaging. She had a disastrous rollout as the nominee in 2020, a presidential, not nominee, but running for president in 2020. Then you've heard, is it her and Buttigieg that are fighting, and because they might be the next people that are going to run for a primary in 24 if Biden doesn't run. I mean, it's again pulling for drama that at this point there really isn't any. And who's to say like what's going to happen in 2024? Of course, Joe Biden says he's going to run for re-election again. And he stated that earlier this week. They said he was going to run, which we knew all along. He's going to say that he's going to run for office until otherwise, because he'll make himself a lame duck already, especially as we head into the midterm. So they're never going to say that he's going to not run.
Yeah, even though he will be 82
mm-hmm.
when he would be running. Even if even if there's no chance that he runs, mm-hmm. there's nothing to be gained from saying it. I definitely agree with that. Yeah,
absolutely. So as far as we know, he's going to run, and as of now, he's going to run. And we don't really see in today's world presidents switching their running mates for second term. It used to happen all the time in the past. It doesn't happen so much anymore, because a lot of times people look at it as like, oh, well, if you couldn't make a good decision the first time around, why should we trust you then if you're changing? I mean, because that was the whole thing that Donald Trump was going to dump Mike Pence. But look, I mean, things are different now. We're in sort of a different world. Donald Trump may run again and become the Republican version of Grover Cleveland if that's what he wants to do to try to get his job back. I don't, obviously he would never run with Mike Pence. And there's a chance for the possibility that, Joe Biden, if he does run again, may pick a different VP. I mean, it's just a different world today if he does run. There's just so many things that are going on. But again, the media hyper focusing on drama and intrigue, it's what the media does best. But I think for the most part, it's more of that than what's really happening in the administration. Sure, she's had a bumpy start. She's not great at messaging. She can come across as awkward, and that was part of the thing that made it difficult for her when she was running her campaign for president to come across. But when she's herself and she can work with constituents and she can get out one-on-one, she is better at that. And Biden and the administration should utilize that more. But they've put her in a very difficult position too, having her do a lot of different difficult tasks that are just not going to look good for her. And I don't know if that was intentional. So if she ever did have aspirations of trying to run in 2024 to kind of overstep him, trying to be the border czar and working on things that don't have an easy answer, also made her job a bit more challenging as well. So but I think a lot of that's just overblown, and there's a plenty of time for us to discuss what's going to happen in 2024.
Oh yeah,
with either side.
plenty of time. Yeah,
Yeah.
whole
So
years. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that the biggest indication of where public perception of her is that I have not seen Maya Rudolph on SNL as Kamala Harris this whole season. So I guess they feel like it's not important, and I think that when we get that back, that'll mean that she's back in the forefront of where she should be there. The White House has insisted that there hasn't been any kind of disruptions, to travel, law enforcement, or the intelligence community from this federal employee vaccine mandate. Then there will be some rules reinstated. I think that in a lot of instances we've seen some. We talked about this a couple months ago. I think it might have been Tamara and I. But this idea that some deadlines seem to have slid to after the holidays. But at some point there will be this point that government agencies, will have to, employees of federal agencies will have to be vaccinated. And those who don't, I guess that you'll just be replaced. And we've talked a lot about sort of why we see that there can be value in mandating, for the health of all of your employees, for the health of your community. But when you start insisting on it and testing's not an option, that is when you run into problems. But yeah, when there was this perception, I guess, that in a city like New York, a lot of firefighters and police, NYPD, were going to resign rather than get vaccinated, and you definitely saw that happened. So we're not seeing that on widespread terms, and I think that might also be part of a media narrative to try and basically scare people that you're not going to be safe when people are already afraid of communities that might decide to revamp the way that they handle their police force. But when it comes to some of these mandates, Scott, do you feel as though that they're going to be in place, and that for the most part we're still going to have services like to imagine being a deep undercover CIA agent, and you're like, yeah, you gotta pull me out because I'm not getting vaccinated, and I quit.
Look, and I'm dealing with this to some degree with in the private sector with people that aren't getting vaccinated, and it's a very difficult fine line when you think about this, the safety of everybody collectively, but also what is your work environment? Where are you with your work? What are you doing with work? Are you around other people? Are you still working remotely? Are you, what is the, I would say, threat level of interacting with people? Are you client facing? I feel like there should be some considerations to some degree.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I understand that, again, just like a private company, the government can mandate these things, and they've done it for other vaccines when it comes down to the collective good. And, we've talked about this too on here. It's like, same thing. If that's not something you want to do, then go work elsewhere or do something different to where you can do that without being vaccinated. And I think, again, if you're a public service official, or you're someone like a firefighter or a police officer or a paramedic or something that's having very close contact with the general public, you're in a position that you're selfless and you're more or less a hero. And to not get the vaccine, not necessarily, it's bigger than yourself. And I know most people don't think of it that way, but a lot of times I get the flu shot every year. It's not because I'm that worried that I'm going to get it severely. It's that I don't want to have it still and then give it to somebody else and they get it
Sure.
more severe. So if I can do something to cut down the risk of somebody else that I'm interacting with, and then the bonus is that I'll likely get the flu less severe because I have the shot. And it's the same thing with COVID. It's like I want to be able to go out and do things and not have to be constantly concerned. But bigger picture is I don't want to have to worry about me interacting with someone and feeling horribly guilty like I did last year. I felt horrible when I was traveling for work, and I did a couple short pleasure trips, at the end of the year last year to see loved ones, and I knew it was somewhat selfish because it was before the vaccines were being administered, and the worst feeling in the world would be like if I went out and I saw somebody and then I tested positive, even if even if they weren't at a place where they would get it severely, it would just be that thought of now I'm giving it to somebody else. Was more than likely I would be okay. So it's more of that is difficult for some people to grasp, is that this is at the end of the day is really to help those beyond you, not just yourself. And so for the most part it's turned into a politicized issue that it never should have been. And I've talked to many people on both sides of the aisle, and it's surprising on some of the answers on either side that are like, oh, one way or the other, that have surprised me. But there was a time and place where they would just get the the polio vaccine in school without even telling their parents. It was just done back in those days. You just got these shots to go to school. I remember to go to college, I had to get
so did I.
hepatitis shots. It's like to do certain things. And again, like I said earlier on this podcast, to leave your house and go do certain things, are certain things you have to take on the risk of going out in the world, but you also have to maybe potentially get a vaccine or a shot if you want to go out and do normal things out in the world as well too. But at the end of the day, nobody's forcing you in that sense. So get a different job, work remotely, find something like that if that's not something that you're capable of doing. But then don't feel bad about or upset that you can't go to the theater or you can't go to a bar or whatever, because if you're not going to be able to do the simple things to protect other people besides just yourself, then that's fine. But then you need to stay back and stay home and figure out other activities, which the great thing about today's world is everything's at your fingertips remotely. And it's even better now than it ever was pre-pandemic as well. So
yeah, no, I mean, it's true. I mean, there's the number of options on my phone for buttons I can push, and food magically shows up on my doorstep with literally, I don't even have to take it from a person,
Exactly.
Exactly. There are some nice things that, day and date movie releases where they're in theaters and then they're also on a streaming app as well. There are some benefits that I think a lot of us are enjoying, and they're just going to be a part of a life. I had never ordered from Grubhub, DoorDash, or Postmates before the pandemic, and
Same.
Now I've used all of them many, many times. I've used up all the coupons that they've sent me. So yeah. Well, in terms of for our last topic, in terms of talking about the idea of shortage of police, there is sort of another problem that we're seeing widespread up in San Francisco. But just before we started, I saw a video, I guess here in Los Angeles, they're putting like a barricade around the Grove in the middle of LA because there was just some kind of, one of these organized, it seems like organized crime is getting groups of people to all hit high-end stores at the same time. And I guess there was something at, I think, an attempt at Nordstrom in Los Angeles. But I mean, I'm assuming, Scott, we've all seen the video out there from, these coordinated attacks in the Bay Area. And, because I think that they were feeling that, that those sort of crimes they weren't going to prosecute. But now I think we're sort of seeing like, yes, I think maybe there could be some instances of, you maybe don't send an officer if, I don't know, like a 15-year-old steals a pack of gum. And, I mean, obviously I'm using a very trite example, but things like this, obviously these sort of things can't be allowed to continue. And you see, you know, just terrible stories every day of the increasing crime in big cities. You know, crimes against stores, obviously not victimless crimes, but then of course also crimes, you know, robberies and worse committed. So I think that we're seeing sort of the importance of figure out within your community what it is. There are communities that have wanted to defund police and sort of have a different approach. But we're seeing the example of somebody has to be there when a group of people decide that they're going to try and steal expensive jewelry.
I mean, look, and this will take a long time to even go through in this segment, more than time than we have. But
yeah,
there's a couple different things here. One is that there's been a bit of an overblown from the media on this. There was a whole, I think it was an earnings report from Target or CVS. One of them, the CEO, basically blamed the shoplifting for their diminishing returns for what they had in the third quarter, which is BS. To be honest with you, it's such a tiny fraction. Yes, it's an issue. Yes, we've seen the crime uptick, which again, turning into a political issue. It was rising steadily over last year. So if you want to make it a political issue, you could say it was under the Trump administration that started. But again, it's not a political issue until you start talking about things out here that voters voted on Prop 47, which made a lot of crimes less into misdemeanors into felonies and shortened jail sentences. And as we know, jail doesn't really necessarily help rehabilitate people like most people think, and prisons are big in business. But it's going to take many more years to really study Prop 47's effect on crime in general, and if there's a correlation between Prop 47 passing. And I know a lot of people aren't happy with the local DA here that got elected last year, George Gascon, who came from San Francisco, who is a progressive DA who advocated shorter, prison terms and prison reforms and punishment reforms and things that we have that, again, a lot of people aren't happy with here in Los Angeles. Yes, there are definitely clearly issues, and it's bigger than just political, and there are bigger issues in big cities with crime going up and with shoplifting going up and sophisticated shoplifting rings that are going on. And that's what's happening in San Francisco. You have sophisticated shoplifting rings that are occurring, and it is an issue and it does need to be dealt with. But it has been overblown a bit by the media and also by CEOs saying their earnings are affected by this is a little bit much, but it's definitely something. And there are concerns there. And obviously homelessness is a huge concern, especially out here in California. When you're in a place like California, it's the biggest state population wise in the country, you're going to have a lot of good, but you also have a lot of bad when you have that many people chasing fewer resources. So it is definitely something that needs to be addressed beyond a political issue that comes from the big cities. Of course, it tends to be a political issue because big cities are generally Democratic and run by Democratic mayors. So that then if anything happens in the big city, it's automatically Democratic policy issue, but it's more than that. And I think we've learned over time, like the defunding the police doesn't work. It was a terrible phrase to begin with, and we've talked about this last year, and we saw that it failed even in Minneapolis, which was the home of where George Floyd had. It did not pass there. And I think that progressives need to reframe the issue on how that means police forces budgets are utilized. It's the same thing we've talked about with the military budgets that are overbloated and have consistently been. So how is the resources for police forces better used, and what do we need to do to prevent crime? And that's a bigger overall issue than just simply making a political one, or just saying, oh, well, everything's gone to crime is so terrible that we have to shut down stores in San Francisco. There's no easy one size fits all approach here. But there does definitely need to be some changes, and crime has risen over the past year from the pandemic and on. And is that a short-term thing? It seems like it's not, because we thought maybe when things started opening up again and people kind of resumed more normal patterns, that maybe crime would go back down again. Just in the sense that, there's a lot of people that weren't out and about, and crime is easier to happen when there aren't people out there to witness it. But it seems to have still have this uptick. And so there are things that we've got to figure out. What is the root cause of this, and what can we do to prevent this across the country? And what can we do to prevent these sophisticated shoplifting rings from continuing in places like San Francisco or spreading to other cities as well. We've started to see that here in Los Angeles and more expensive enclaves like Rodeo Drive and Beverly Hills. We've started to see that as well. And that's something that they really need to focus on for sure.
Yeah, and it's just my upbringing. I was always so naive. I never understood why stores like that, that I would bring visitors from out of town to Rodeo Drive just to see it. We wouldn't go in any stores, but there, it was I'm not spending money on Rodeo Drive, but it was just like, oh, there's like an armed guy standing there when you walk in, and you don't really think about it. But yeah, obviously it's a very real problem. And I think that, we're just seeing it. And I think it just sort of adds to this idea that, if the perception somehow becomes that crimes like these would be left unchecked, then people would be scared. Like, why wouldn't it happen, on a smaller scale at a store that isn't as high end? So, yeah, I think sort of dealing with it at that level becomes a concern. And, hopefully we don't have much. There's no need to focus on this too much, but I don't expect it's going to go away overnight.
Oh no, it's not, and it's a bigger issue, and it is going to hound, and particularly it's going to become a political issue as we get into the midterms as well. And better believe that it's going to be out there like it was in 2020, and it definitely needs to be addressed. And you're right, the shoplifting rings and the negative media attention to this will continue, and people do need to feel safe going to their local Target and pharmacy and everything as well. So it is a serious thing that needs to be considered, but there's not a one size fits all, just like homelessness, because if there was, then these things would be resolved fairly easily, and they're not, because there's a lot of different things at play that cause these things to happen. And so there's not one easy solution either.
No, and hopefully people didn't come to us for easy solutions on all the things we talked about, because we don't have them. But hopefully people enjoyed the conversation, as they always do, and hopefully everyone has a very happy Thanksgiving wherever you're going or wherever you've traveled to. Hopefully you enjoy your turkey or tofurkey or whatever it is that will be on your table. We hope that everybody has a great one. We will be back next week. Time TBD as always, but we'll do our best to let you know. Scott, if people want to keep in touch with you and wish you a happy Thanksgiving, how do they do that?
They can find me on Twitter at sman80. That's sman80. You can see it right there.
Right there. And I am Christian DMZ. You can find me there, and please subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel. Just right before this show, we did more of a movie talk. We reviewed the first 2 episodes of Hawkeye on Disney Plus, and I've done a number of musician interviews this week. There was a 24-hour period where I did 5 shows, Scott.
Wow.
Earlier this week. And yeah, I punted a few things too many from last week, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I got to get it all done within 3 days. So,
man, I remember those days doing multiple shows. It's been a while for me though, but good for you.
But we appreciate everybody's time, and we'll see you next week. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody.